pleasure to be here. I am a little nervous. I'm having a bit of an identity crisis, to be honest. A few weeks ago, I hailed a taxi outside Parliament. I got in the back of the cab. The cabbie said to me, "Good evening, Mr. Blunkett." Clearly, I'm not using enough Clinique. Other products also exist on the market. I said to the cabbie, "I'm not David Blunkett." He said, "Yes, you are." I recognise the dog. Oh. She always lies down at this point of the presentation. Feel free to follow her example. So I've come on stage with a guide dog. I must be talking about diversity and inclusion, right? Inclusion's in the title of my presentation. This must be what I'm about to go on about. Well, yes and no. Let's see where we get to. Where did it all start for me? I grew up in the Midlands, a white, working class, post-industrial town near Birmingham. Anybody here from Birmingham? Welcome. That's not bad. Generally, when I ask that question, it's greeted by complete silence, even if I'm speaking in Birmingham. But I went to the local comprehensive school. It was described as the worst school in the county. I'd like to think that some of the things I did helped to give it that reputation. And at that point, I knew exactly what it meant to be in structures, in predetermined silos. What was determined for us? Metalwork, woodwork, technical drawing, and a route into the factories and foundries of the West Midlands, even though, even at that stage, they were already foundering in post-industrial decline. In contrast, the grammar school up the road, Latin, German, and let's be honest, coaching through examinations. But for us, it was predetermined to follow the footsteps, the hobnail-booted footsteps of our forebears. But when I was 14, I went to bed one night, and when I woke up, I couldn't see. I'd lost my sight overnight. Not expected, not predicted, certainly something I didn't think I'd ever have to face in my life or could have ever imagined that. So, what did the social silos have to say about that? What they said was, never mind that route into the factories and the foundries, no matter how low that level of aspiration was for you, that's gone. Game over. You've got to go to a special school. You've got to go to a blind school. How one tells whether a school's blind or not, I've absolutely no idea. And if you really, really try, you might be able to become a piano tuner or a basket weaver. I, aged 14, didn't know the word silo. I didn't know the word inclusion, but what I knew fundamentally was I wanted something different. I wanted something more from that. I wanted to achieve those dreams I'd had since being really little, to do A-levels, to get to Cambridge University, and to represent Great Britain at sport. How would I do that in such a rigidly structured, siloed society? Well, it certainly wouldn't be done by just going down the path that was laid out for me. Fast forward, I got through A-levels, I got to Cambridge, I got to the Barcelona Games in 1992, and I came back from Barcelona very, very luckily with 6 gold medals in my kit bag. I made one... Thank you. I only realized years later the sheer financial error I'd made when I discovered the silver medals were worth more than the gold medals. But I came back from Barcelona, Atlanta 4 years later. What should I do at that point? Now, the smart person says, do exactly what you'd done for Barcelona and you'll achieve in Atlanta. Just carry on doing the same thing. Had I done that, though, I would have done the same times that I'd swum in Barcelona, times which wouldn't even make the final, never mind the rostrum 4 years later. I had to put everything out there, consider changing every element of what I did, everything out there to be potentially changed, eradicated, new things brought in. Otherwise, 4 years later, just wouldn't have happened. Was lucky enough to go to Atlanta and Sydney, 3 more gold medals. Then I climbed out of the pool and got involved with the bid to bring the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games back to London for the first time in 64 years. What did the silo tell us about this? It told us the Games had already been predetermined to go to Paris. We did not accept that. We built a bid committee, 50 of us who believed, 50 of us in a flat structure. Everybody had a voice, and everybody's voice would be listened to. All ideas welcome, all in the mix to have a vibrant, dynamic, fluid structure. This was the only way that we were going to have a chance of potentially just pipping Paris. A matter of weeks before we went to Singapore for the decision, there was a piece in one of the broadsheets. I won't say which one it was. It's printed on pink paper. I'll say no more. And it went something like this. Later this summer, the dust carts will arrive to sweep away the rubbish of the failed London Olympic and Paralympic bid. Weeks before we were going to Singapore, we had to push that to one side, continue to believe, continue to have that fluid structure, and take some bold, some courageous decisions. We figured when we have the decision, the people in the hall need to reflect everything we've said about what our bid is. So we figured, let's not have the great and the good, the white, middle-aged, middle-class men, politicians, business people who've been involved with the bid. Let's fill our seats with the school kids from the host boroughs around the Olympic Park. A decision which came from somebody who was just working part of the bid, fabulous, was able to get right to the top, and that reflected exactly what we were trying to do with the London bid. Not a bid for the great and the good, a bid for everybody. And as we saw earlier in Martine's phenomenal presentation, Jacques Rogge didn't say Paris, he said London. But imagine we've won the bid, we're pretty tired. The first day of the planning of the London 2012 Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, bombs go off on 3 London Underground trains and a London bus. That's the backdrop to day one, and yet we had to keep the focus, the purpose in what we were trying to achieve. To replicate that structure we had in the bid, in the organising committee, a flat structure where everybody's voice would be heard. Having athletes at the heart of every decision, judging everything by this measure. Will this improve the games for the athlete? If it won't, why are we doing it? Every decision having to pass that test. To have an organising committee made in Britain, for Britain, reflecting modern Britain, to deliver a games that would absolutely speak to the world from London, from 21st century Britain. It wasn't about bringing in the brightest and the best and them having to adapt to us. It was building a structure right from the outset which would enable everybody to come and be part of it. School leavers at 16 we took on. NEETs from the host boroughs. People from around the world. Ex-offenders. Australians. Apparently there's a difference. Any Australians here? Yeah, well, fair play. You did okay in the rugby, let's be honest. We had to have a structure which could attract and enable the best from right around the world and every sector of society to flourish, because we had the most immovable of deadlines. Nobody would say, what a great games, London 2013. 27th of July, 2012, immovable of deadlines. And what we said to everybody coming into the organisation, from whatever background, whatever previously they'd done, was simply this: we want you, we need you to do the best work of your lives. Winning mentality to match the world-class performances that we would experience from the athletes of the world in the summer of 2012. It wasn't even about smashing silos. It was about not creating and establishing them in the first place. Perhaps the best example of success of this was when we got into, well, let's be honest, a little bit of difficulty with our security provider. Some of you may have seen some headlines around that subject. Now, that could have been a disaster. Everything else that we've done for the Games, that could have brought the Games to its knees. Military ride in to rescue 2012. You can imagine the headlines. But because of the way we'd structured the organisation, unsiloed, when that happened, that wasn't seen as a problem for the security directorate. That wasn't even seen as a problem for the organising committee. It was seen as a problem for the United Kingdom's Games. We could call up the Home Office, we could call up the Ministry of Defence, and we could bring in that military solution and it be seen as a sign of success. Our brilliant military on the front gates of the Games, a success, a fabulous element of 2012, which just as easily could have been seen as a disaster had we not had that unsiloed structure. To the Games makers, this is why you can't have siloed organisations. How do you control 70,000 people who you're asking to work the best work of their lives and you're giving them no money? How do you control them? You can't, you shouldn't, we didn't, we wouldn't. Because ultimately, it was about the culture we created of getting 70,000 people in there, most of whom were much more likely to meet our spectators, our athletes, than any of the 8,000 full-time staff we had. The Games makers had to be exactly that. We didn't call them volunteers, we called them Games makers because these were the individuals who would make the Games. Teach, train, test, and crucially, trust. Enable them to understand their role and then bring their personality, themselves, unprescribed within that role. Perhaps the best example of it, the ones who are in the last mile, you saw in between the transport and the gates of the venue, on the umpire chairs, they had an incredibly important safety role to perform. Something could go wrong in seconds when you're looking at those crowd flows. But within that, without compromising that operational role, to bring of themselves and to give that chat, any Australians out there? All that stuff, unprescribed, working brilliant, to make that environment buzz, to not just be operational, but to be experiential. That running through every element of the Games Maker training, and you saw it in their phenomenal delivery. So to the Paralympics, a tricky product, largely unknown with the general public before 2012. What did research tell me? It told me the best any previous Games had done was a 40% ticket sell. And it told me, historically, no Games had got all Olympic sponsors, no Games had got broadcast deals, No games had broken through and become a truly global event. I knew we had to do all of that stuff and more. None of it would happen if we just bowed down to structural silos, and more importantly, to the emotional and the psychological silos of the difficulties around disability. How do you put together the concept of elite sport and disability without that being tricky for people? How do you do it? You put together something like this film that we made with Channel 4, which we'll show you right now.
What goes on? Rolling stones in the rap game, not bragging. Look bigger than Jagger, not sagging. Spell it backwards, I'ma leave it at that. That ain't got nothing to do with rap. Get up.
Just like that.
Get up.
Just like that.
Get up.
Just like that.
Get up.
Just like that. I know this is a shock.
Screaming gangster 20 years later. Of course, endorse while consciousness faded. New generations believe in them fables. Gangsta boogie on 2 turntables. Thank you for letting us be ourselves. So don't mind me if I repeat myself. These simple lines be good for your health. To keep them crime rhymes on the shelf. Live love life like you just don't care. Never scared. Rain and noise is the moment they feared. Get up, still a beautiful idea.
"18 months in the making, 90 seconds to blast into people's consciousness." And perhaps the most significant part of that little clip is the 2-second bit in the middle, which raises it from just a piece of sports marketing to something which says, this is how to smash through silos of thought. This is how to present what the Paralympic Games could be for the first time. All Olympic sponsors, also Paralympic sponsors, broadcast deals around the world, every ticket sold out for the first time. To the opening ceremony, let's get the most significant disabled person living, perhaps of all time, Stephen Hawking. The greatest thing when I was doing the job of director, I could pick up the phone, people would take my call. Now, I'm lucky if I've even got a ringtone. But Professor Hawkins, people said he'd love to. And imagine that, the Paralympic Games starting with him in the centre of the stadium. Not just talking about possibility beyond ourselves, talking about possibilities beyond our universe. That is silo smashing. 11 days of the most sensational sport which people would have never heard of before, never mind bought a ticket for. Smash through those silos in the mind. Wheelchair rugby, the Canadians call it murder ball. This game is so tough, they don't just have a physio on the bench, they have a welder. "11 days of the most sensational, mind-changing, silo-smashing, thought-inducing, opportunity-creating sport. A closing ceremony with the president of the IPC saying London 2012, the greatest Paralympic Games ever." I'll only give you one piece of advice. Never, ever, ever speak at a primary school. And I'll tell you for why. One of the greatest things about London 2012 was the Get Set Education programme, going to every school in the country to talk about what we were trying to do, this unleashing of the possible. I went to a school in a London borough which shall remain nameless for reasons which will become apparent. As I was crossing the playground, the kids getting quite excited, going, "Who's that? Who's that?" I heard the teacher go, "It's Chris Holmes." I heard a bunch of kids go, "It's Chris Holmes, it's Chris Holmes." Unfortunately, Then a larger bunch of kids went, "It's Chris Hoy!" All of which may have been okay had it not been when it got to questions. 3 questions in, a little kid puts his hand up and he says, "Oi, mister." At first I thought we were going to go into a musical version of Oliver or something. He says, "Oi, mister, where does your dog go when you're on your bike?" I've no idea where that story takes us. I just thought I'd share it. So what to do when I've spent 10 years of my life with LOCOG? What to do is this: work with public sector, private sector organisations and take all of that games learning into their organisations. Working with local authorities, driving efficiencies, taking 25% off their budget, not as a cost-cutting exercise, but to drive an efficiency and do things different. What's the purpose? What's at the heart of what you're trying to achieve? 25% taken out of the budget, customer complaints down, staff satisfaction up. Working with a FTSE 100 to globalise their IT function, take the cost out, bring the collaboration in. Driving performance, an utter, unrelenting commitment to performance, so you don't have those moments in the office where someone isn't performing, but you just stop looking them in the eye. You just stop giving them work. You move their desk, perhaps, to the part of the office that everybody knows is the departure lounge. That is not the way to get the best out of people and your organisation. And the great thing about all of this is there is no magic. It's about vision, mission, strategy, plan, people, clarity of purpose from the get-go, and committing to that right the way through. There is no magic. The magic is in sticking to it. And ultimately, at the essence of it, it's about belief. Believe in yourselves, believe in your teams and your colleagues. Crucially, believe in what you're trying to achieve. Smash the silos, promote the purpose, and unleash your people, unleash them to do the best work of their lives. Thank you very much. Thank you.
She's ready to get going, Chris. She knows you finished. You're on your way off. Just wanted to ask you a quick question, because I went to one of the Olympic events, and just an amazing experience when you talk about the games makers. For me, that was the games, even above some of the brilliant sporting performances. How do you bring that into the world that these people live in day to day? Because there was a greater purpose. We hadn't had the games for over 60 years. People got very, very excited and very, very proud to be British. But how does that translate?
It is absolutely in that sense of purpose. Having the biggest P purpose at the heart of everything that you're involved in. Businesses say they've got a purpose, they may well have. How does that connect to everybody in the organisation? Yep, we had a phenomenal opportunity with 2012, a phenomenal opportunity with the Games Maker programme, but nothing happened as a matter of chance. Everything happened because we imagined it, we planned it, we tested it, and hundreds of thousands of brilliant people delivered it. That is absolutely replicable in any situation. A tiny example with the stuff I'm currently involved in with some local authorities. We're doing stuff with everybody from the chief executive across the organisation, the accounts department, dustmen, everybody buying into this and starting from that sense of what's the purpose? What are we trying to achieve here? Unleash the talent, and all organisations will just be truly amazed at what is lying dormant right now, today.
Lord Chris Holmes and Lottie, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.